I'd say the biggest thing mindfulness can do is give you a different sense of what it is to be you.
Hey y'all, grab those headsets. It's time for another episode of 911 Delta Tethered for Life podcast. We're your crazy host, Quesadilla.
And Annabug. Hey y'all, thanks for joining us for another episode of 911 Delta Tethered for Life. This podcast may not be suitable to all listeners due to language and subject matters. Please listen with care. Hey y'all, welcome back to the 911 Delta Tethered for Life podcast. I'm your host, solo host this week, Anna Fox, and I think you're in for a fascinating conversation. This week, I interviewed Josh Grandinetti, founder of Foundation Fortified and current fire captain. We jump into the world of mindfulness for first responders. Josh is intent on sharing his practice without any of the dogma or stigma that can be attached to meditation. If just 10 minutes a day can significantly improve resilience, emotional regulation, and overall well-being, shouldn't you give it a try? Grab those headsets and listen up. All right, well, welcome, Josh, to 911 Delta Tethered for Life. Tell us a little bit about yourself and Foundation Fortified.
Well, my name is Josh Grandinetti. I've been a fire captain now for about 5 years. I've been in the fire service for, going on 15 years, and I've been a paramedic 12 of those. I've recently been injured at work, and so it's kind of given me the opportunity to start Foundation Fortified, which has kind of been one of those ideas that kind of sits on your shelf. You're hoping you get around to one day, and just it's hard to, right? And after this injury, time away from work is just given the opportunity to get it off the ground, get it started, and hopefully introduce it. So
what made you decide to get into this crazy public safety life?
Oh man. Well, I tell people all the time, I was going to college to be a neuroscientist of all things. I wanted to study the brain. I wanted to study the mind. And I was going to community college, and I just took a small class. It was a CPR first aid class they were offering. And it was a Tempe firefighter, a local firefighter, who taught the class. And she was just the coolest person I'd ever met. You know, she just had all the know-how. She was just always in a great mood. She was just such a force. Anytime there was a problem, she had a solution. And I just look forward to being in class with her. And she just kind of derailed my life. I just thought like there had to be something about that career that made somebody such a strong person. So I abandoned my aspirations to be a neuroscientist and went head on into firefighting. And the craziest thing about the entire story is I don't even remember the woman's name. I don't even remember her name. So someday gosh. I might shake her hand, but I can't remember. I think it was Lisa. That's what I got.
So. That is funny. And so then you got into the fire service and you were like, Lisa lied.
No, not at all. Not at all. I mean, I would say that Lisa told the truth. I was too naive to realize all the work and hard effort that would take to be such a wise person at the time. I thought it would just come with the helmet alone and I would be her, but
right.
I didn't realize I had to go and figure it out. So
nice. So do you guys out in Arizona, do you do like the National Fire Academy stuff?
Yeah.
Okay. You're not like Florida.
No.
Okay.
Phoenix Fire kind of has their own set of volume 2 that we all kind of observe, right?
Okay.
They have their own operating guidelines. They've become such a big department in the area that they've kind of bent the entire state toward their policies. But we definitely observe all the same standards and everything that we would see anywhere else. You know what I mean? Obviously, I work for a small rural department for Eloy, Arizona. So it's a very small department. The city of Eloy itself is mostly known for skydiving. It's the #1 skydiving place in the world, actually. So that's what Eloy is known for.
Mm-hmm. Does that make for some interesting calls?
I've had my fair share of bouncers. I've had my fair share of them. Truth be told, Eloy is a very safe place to jump out of, but you do it long enough in the area, and you're going to be on shift the days where it's anything but safe for one person at least, right? So I've had my fair share.
It's so funny, I guess. I don't know, the first agency that I worked for, also small rural department, and they have a skydive, and it's very popular. And it's so weird, but I guess, I don't know why you would think that it's weird to be in this out in the middle of nowhere,
Mhm.
Virginia, because where else would you skydive? Like, you're not going to do it in Fairfax County, right? So, it makes sense, but again, it doesn't make sense. So yes, and it is very safe,
Well, but
but
that's one of the reasons why Eloy is number one in the world.
you
It's
get,
always the perfect weather. There's
yeah,
very few trees out here. They can predict
right.
the winds very safely. So like Eloy just happens to be in this one area where the winds kind of avoid the area. The weather's always predictable. It's always 1,000 degrees.
Right.
So you're just jumping.
Which means it's not as cold when you're up high
Yeah.
as
And it briefly lasts for the med. That's actually why people
right.
skydive, just to get out of the heat for that brief
I
moment.
believe it. Yeah, I might have tried it if I was in Tucson long enough. Got to get me out of here. Oh my gosh. Oh, neat. Okay. So what made you, I guess, what started your desire to do the Foundation Fortified? Because you said it's been cooking in there for a little bit. And now that are you on leave or are you just on light duty?
So I'm on leave right now. I actually have a surgery coming up in 2 days. It'll be my second knee surgery I have to have. This one will hopefully get me walking properly. And that way, that's kind of the first step, if you will, right
Right.
in recovery, is just trying to walk. And I've had trouble there. So hopefully this next surgery not only awards me that gift back, but hopefully the ones that come with it. Some of the dynamic movement I still hope to do. But
Yeah.
yeah, I got one more surgery coming up tomorrow, or a day after tomorrow, and so I have time away again to kind of focus on Foundation Fortified. I went back to work briefly for about a week, and then got my next surgery scheduled. So
Gotcha.
yeah.
So how long has this idea been cooking?
Well, I started meditating personally about 13 years ago. Oh, I'm sorry, 8 years ago. Just as a personal journey, right?
Mhm.
And I kind of had to wade through a lot of confusion when I first started. You'll try to find different meditation classes in the area, and meditation, for all of its benefits, it does come with 2,000 years of religious dogmatism that most people kind of have to wade through. Um, and I've been lucky to find this term called mindfulness, right? And mindfulness is kind of the West's attempt. There have been about 30 or 40 teachers over the years that have gone over to the East, discovered what they had to teach there, and then try to pull from that what's valuable scientifically about what we know focusing one's attention can do for someone's mental health, someone's overall well-being, things like that. That's what's scientifically defensible, is this umbrella of mindfulness, right? So when I started meditating, I had to kind of wade through a lot of this religious dogmatism that just kind of makes you not really want to return if you don't really have a sincere curiosity or discipline toward it, right? And so when I first started sitting, I began to notice some similarities between my job and what the teachers were trying to get through. They would strike a gong or something in one session, and I would notice that I'd have a reaction where other people wouldn't, and it just made me realize my sensitivity toward noises because of the station tones or whatever else. Um, and there are many practices where some of our experiences as first responders, but also some of our training as first responders, can really lend itself toward mindfulness as a practice. But some of the traumas that we experience on our shifts also make mindfulness kind of a walking landmine if you don't have an instructor that can help you guide through what you're going to have to experience again. There's many teachings throughout meditation practices, and a lot of them focus on this idea of suffering. And I found it very difficult to find a mindfulness instructor or teacher that would understand it's imposed within one's career to have to embrace and impact suffering in your community. That's why you do it. You aren't avoiding suffering. You're going out and you're going to take it on for someone else. But that impact in our lives over time kind of leaves a residue that can be difficult to manage. But that's where I believe mindfulness can really help us as first responders understand how we're adapting, how we're feeling in the moment, how we're understanding our bodies and our experience as we change throughout our careers and even through our moment to moment experience, right? So Foundation Fortified's always kind of been this brewing thing I wanted to get off the ground for first responders. And, blessing or a curse. I got injured, so it's given me the time to do it, get my education, and finally put my first round of this course out online for people to go discover. So
nice. So you are certified? Is it a certification?
yes,
Mindfulness? Tell me
yes.
about
So
that.
so I went through some waters of where I could try to get to some certification, some grounding for understanding. There were many things that were offered to me for, $50. I could, get my yoga / mindfulness certificate. You know what I
Right.
mean? And someone who actually very much respects what mindfulness, what meditation is for human culture, for human beings, I wanted to get a deep education. So I did look up some resources online on where to go. There were many offsite practices or places I could go get an education that were going to take several months. And because of my injury, I just didn't have that availability. But luckily, there was a resource I found online that is IMMA certified. So I took that course. It's through Mindful Exercises. I took their course in trauma sensitivity mindfulness and mindfulness itself. So I did that about 6 months ago. So fresh off that, already had plenty of curriculum that I had waiting to get out there for first responders. So it's been a fun time for me to finally, get out there and try to help and try to bring this idea to what I think is, I think we neglect this practice at our own peril in our industry. I really do.
Yeah, I think we do too. And it's really funny. I was actually thinking about it in preparation for talking to you. And I've always I've ridden horses since I was 8 years old.
Mm.
And I remember that, and I always competed as well. And I remember at some point, this is how old I am, Josh, so don't judge me. But my parents bought me these cassette tapes. It was a series, and it was called Riding with Your Mind. I'm pretty sure that's what it's called anyway. And it was basically about visualization techniques, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure there was more mindfulness in there than I remember, because at the time it didn't. But anyway, I remembered this, and I remember like thinking, God, this is kind of hard.
Mm-hmm.
And I would be trying to visualize. I used to ride jumping horses, so I would try to visualize, and I would get lost like halfway through, and I'd, and come back to it. And so then in college, I actually studied sports medicine and was a certified athletic trainer. And of course, that was also mindfulness, I think, as a whole, and like meditation was just sort of starting to be talked about then, but visualization techniques were big still for athletes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so especially for whatever reason, like the track athletes were all into that, especially the jumpers and the throwers. That was, they were really into that stuff. So a little bit of education with it there. And then I lived in Germany for a couple years. They're more into that sort of thing. So like another, a little bit of a layer. And when I came back to the States, I got into a yoga class, funnily enough. And it was really my first formal introduction to yoga. And she would always do like this little mindfulness practice.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had children, and my kids are only 18 months apart. And so there was a large part of time where I was actually not riding horses at all, or very limited, right? And I was struggling, like, wow, it was really hard. And I always knew that being on the horse was like, it did something for me. And so I started looking, more into the mindfulness thing. And it occurred to me one day, I was like listening to actually another horse guy talk about meditating. And he was saying, I'm actually terrible at it. He's like, "Oh, we should all be terrible at it, really, because that's the practice, right? Is to your mind wanders and then you bring it back." And I was like, no. When I am writing, that's the only time that my mind doesn't wander. Like I'm focused, right? I'm there, I'm present, I'm with whatever's happening between me and the horse. And when I got back into it again, I started to get back into it after having 2 kids. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy how much it affects my mental health. And at that time I had gone to part-time dispatching. And so then I was getting sort of a little more of an outsider's view of, I'd go in and I'm like, oh, that's bad energy, and so it has really since then. And so my kids are 7 and 5 now, or 7 and 6. Sorry, he'd kill me. 7 and 6, and the other one's almost 8. So I've gotten more interested in it, and definitely practice more, because when you have 2 screaming kids around, I mean, they're boys. I think I listened to another podcast that you were on, and you said you have 2 boys too, right?
Yes. So I have an 11-year-old and a 9-year-old.
Oh yeah.
So
So
I
yeah.
definitely know raising boys, but they're such a blessing. They're so much fun. I'm so
Oh yeah.
lucky to have them. But you do, once again, just like you earn your collection as a firefighter, you got to earn your collection as a father. It seems like,
Oh yeah.
But there's a lot to talk about some of the experiences you shared there. But the one that hooked me the most was the one talking about your horse, obviously, and talking about what riding has done for you. And you said somewhere you had to take a break because you became a mother, which obviously no better way to take a break than becoming a mother. But you never do know when that last time you're going to be able to ride a horse is, though, do you? Right. You really don't know. And what many of us try to relate mindfulness to as just non-practitioners of the mind are these flow experiences that we can discover in things that we love to do, right? There are these moments where hours have maybe passed by and you've just kind of watched your hands create this thing that you were almost not present for, right? You were just part of the experience. And that is a very mindful state that we can have just in normal awareness, right? But these kind of just glom onto us in our lives, and we're just lucky to have that flow experience for the duration that it will, right? Whereas mindfulness meditation, an actual practice, is what you're doing on the cushion is you're just trying to notice what is arising at any given moment. And anytime you become distracted from that project, to just notice and to come back to awareness, right? And whatever that means for you at the moment. We can get into like some of the disciplines, some of the practices, some of the techniques, but flow experiences are very different from mindfulness practice as just a discipline, because when we're sitting there trying to be mindful, we're going to fail. And the number of times we fail, right? How hard we feel like we fail. These are all just stories we're telling ourselves, further distracting us, right? When we're trying to be mindfully present. But the goal is really to take the practice off the cushion, to try to have more of these flow states. I mean, what really is the difference between you on your horse or you with your children just building a puzzle? There really is no difference. And we tell ourselves this lie that we need to either spend a certain amount of money, buy a certain plane ticket to a certain destination to be present, to have fun, to be in the moment, right? Where we can really find that in any given, there has to be something here worth enjoying, right? There has to be something in this moment, in this conversation, that's worth having. And that's what mindfulness meditation can really teach you. Is there are so many things that we try to do to find happiness, as responders, as humans, as just people. We want a drink of a certain temperature, of a certain flavor, of a certain size. And if it's none of those things, it's nothing. If it can't be all of those things. And we constantly are just, your mind's 2 jobs really are to keep you safe, right? And to keep you mildly dissatisfied with your experience. People don't realize that one of their brain's biggest job is to keep you slightly dissatisfied, which is why our achievements kind of disappear in our hands as we get them, and why the coffee that we waited in line 15 minutes to get now has too much ice, and it's not, and now we're frustrated we lost the experience, right? You
Right.
know, we all live our lives in this way, and we don't notice it. And mindfulness meditation can kind of help you cultivate your attention in a way that you just give your attention to what matters, and let slip away doesn't. You know, it's not that you won't have emotions, it's not that you won't have thoughts. It's just the ability to not live out the consequences of those thoughts and emotions. Does this make sense?
Oh yeah. Yes. And I think that is so hard for a lot of responders because I was listening to actually a video earlier that was talking about the benefits of mindfulness and how, you know, you can start to create your experience rather than sort of like you're saying, kind of be a victim of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we get so, and I don't know, sometimes my husband's a firefighter medic too. So
I'm
sometimes I
sorry.
wonder. I wonder, y'all, like, I don't know. You're not nearly as jaded as a lot of the dispatchers. I don't know why, but anyway, I think y'all just have more fun. But so we dispatchers in particular, like
Mhm.
you're just 99% of the time the next call is going to be because somebody's iced coffee did not have enough ice, or it had too much ice, or was not the right size.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And they waited 20 minutes in the drive-through at Starbucks, and
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and now Starbucks won't give them their $4 back or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's we kind of start to create this thing. And then what happens is when you get a major incident or you
Mm-hmm.
get really busy,
Mm-hmm.
you get into your flow state
Mm-hmm.
and then you forget about it. And then it becomes that adrenaline rush, right? Well, when I get that, I get into my flow state and then I'm good.
Mm-hmm.
So then we turn into these adrenaline junkies,
Yeah.
right?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I would definitely say that, obviously the life of a responder, the life of a dispatcher, I have nothing but respect for dispatchers. I've always told my crew, because the tendency is we tend to notice when dispatchers don't get it right, but we fail to realize the 1,000 times they do. And I tell my crew this, right? Like, the nice thing about being a firefighter and, letting the fire get a little out of control is who's going to know the difference if you burned only half a room or 2 rooms. You're still heroes at the end of the day.
Right.
Um, but dispatchers, you know what I mean? Like, you guys, the right resources, the right time, the right mode, and it is really a different job. And the sad state for dispatchers is you guys are left to your own imaginations to,
Hmm.
to, to deal with the consequences of what may or may not have happened. And then you find yourself in the area of where the dispatcher incident happened. And sometimes you might be lucky to have a cop come and clarify some questions, but many times you just have your own hidden imagination and tell you a haunting story about something that may or may not have happened, and that's also not a state that you want to be in, right? So
Right.
getting to what you were saying about creating one's experience, there's nothing about anyone's mind or experience that is being created, right? Everything is just happening for you, and to the extent that you feel like you're doing and making yourself mad or happy in any given moment, or satisfied or dissatisfied, this is just, I would argue, like a lack of one's own attention. Does that make sense? We
Yeah.
oftentimes find ourselves angry, or find ourselves even satisfied or happy, and then we apply a story as to why that is, right? But
Right.
really, it's an untrue story. You know what I mean? It's not quite as true as we tend to argue for ourselves. Mindfulness can definitely show you that whether or not you're angry or sad in the moment, or whether or not you're gratified or dissatisfied, this is just a state of the mind that will pass or stay as long as it will. But you, the person that is aware of that experience, the you that you take yourself to be, doesn't need to attach to that state, right? doesn't need to make their environment become that state for their life, for their loved ones, in a way that if you are a frustrated person and an undisciplined mind, you're going to be frustrated, and you're going to act out the consequences of that frustration onto your crew or your family or your loved ones. And then you kind of become that frustration, right? Like that's kind of what they're getting at there. And some of that teaching is like, frustration is going to happen within, but it can pass as quickly as it came. The frustration really comes on when you yourself allow your own behavior to change and to become it for as long as it will. And then there's the whole phase of dealing with the consequences of whatever irrational choices you made under that state, right? And that
Right.
becomes its own source of frustration and suffering, depending on what you have to, apologize for or respond to. So,
Right. So how do you deal with, I know you talked a little bit earlier about people having this sense that there's a religious
mm,
dogmatism to mindfulness and meditation practices. But
mhm,
then we also know that in the first responder world, the stigma of like the woo woo.
mhm. Yeah, of course, as an advocate of mindfulness and as an advocate of meditation, there's a whole spiritual context of just like deep meaning and purpose that you really can have. Even, I have no doubt that people who are in deep prayer are having an experience. And I have
Sure.
no doubt that somebody who is sitting amongst a beautiful waterfall are also having a very deep experience because of, whatever's going on in society. But these are all just different states of the mind. In the same way that when you're frustrated, this isn't an awe-inspiring experience, we're just frustrated. But awe-inspiring experiences really come through at us when we're deep in concentration or reflection, right? This is where the awe-inspiring experiences kind of come into our lives. And mindfulness meditation is a place where you can kind of go and find that about your everyday experience with given enough attention, given enough time and discipline in your training. You really can be, what's the difference between sitting on this cushion and this next breath, or seeing a beautiful waterfall with a rainbow and an eagle flying over? I'm sure that's a great experience to have, but with enough concentration, right here in this conversation, I can be just as full of joy. You know what I mean?
Right.
And this is an experience that's worth trying to train for. It's an experience worth having. You do have one life. We do have one life to live, and you're the primary beneficiary of the amount of happiness that you achieve in that lifetime. You know, Mindfulness practice can just really give you the keys to what's worth having in your life, what's worth enjoying, and what's worth not being troubled by any further than you need to or ought to in order to respond to it. Um, I think given I've often told my crew, if exercise was discovered by people 2,000 years ago, and they had these, they felt their bodies getting big, and they felt their hearts getting strong, and they believed a deity of some sort was responsible for it, we might avoid physical exercise for 2,000 years too, but we just discovered exercise in a different route. Mindfulness meditation really is just a way of training the mind, and religious practices have kind of dominated that space for a long time, and kind of applied, in my opinion, false narratives, reasons, or even deities to the practice that don't need to be there for everyday practitioners to get the benefits for their personal relationships to their life and to their careers. That's kind of the way I try to separate the two, but it does come with the territory. And that's where at Foundation Fortified, you'll definitely, what we're teaching there is just straightforward mindfulness meditation for trauma responders, and supporters of responders as well. So,
I think that's so important. One of the things that Casey and I talk about a lot on the show is, supporting families
mm,
of first responders, because they need it just as much as,
absolutely. I
we
so
do.
you know I have a wife. I've been married for 13 years. I have two boys, and this injury's kind of given me some pretty pretty clear understanding of what it must be like for most firewives. Obviously, I understood to the degree that I could understand, but then coming home and being here for an extended period of time, it was weird to watch the cycles of my family kind of be different in a way that I couldn't influence for a little while. I kind of had to be welcomed by my family into that influence, and
Right.
it was nice to slowly edge my way in there, but for a little while there was this time where they kind of had their own three-way family, right? And my boys kind of missed that. You know what I mean? They've missed that since
Right.
since dad's been home. And although that is a change they're going to have to get used to with this injury, I could empathize with what that must be for them. Um, Mindfulness meditation isn't necessarily for responders or for, it's just for human beings to collect almost just data on yourself as a person. Does this make sense? Like
Yeah.
how are you experiencing, thinking, and feeling today in this moment, in this sit? And as you do this day in, day out, throughout the days and weeks, as your life changes, as your experience changes, as some days are hard, some days are good, as you're collecting data on oneself in a way that kind of gives you more clues to, if a day is starting to paint a certain way, you just know what to be a little bit on the alert for yourself. You also know to be a little bit more patient and forgiving of oneself for your mistakes, in a way that kind of allows you to pump the brakes. No part of that is only for responders. My wife is desperately one of the most important people to me, and I know she's been lonely, and I know she's had her issues that she can speak to, right? And as far as teaching mindfulness to children, I am learning as I go. Okay. I'm learning as a mindfulness instructor, but, the resources for teaching mindfulness to kids are kind of difficult. They're a little difficult out there. And I hope Foundation Fortified can be a really good resource for parents that do want to share that with their kids, that they find mindfulness itself valuable. I do hope that there's a way that we can, teach groups of children, at different age ranges, different techniques, but that's to be discovered.
Yeah. Because I think people we're so about going through life and with these experiences and getting everything done, right?
Mm,
Checking the boxes, doing X, Y, Z, and um not taking the time. And I remember back, actually, the first agency that I worked at, my husband worked at the same agency at the time, and they they put in this like 2-hour personal development time in
mhm,
their day.
mhm,
And I was like, well, it must be nice. Well, 2 hours of just, you know,
mhm,
we didn't
mhm,
get that. Now, mind you, we work 12-hour shifts, not 24s.
mhm.
But, it's interesting though. Like, we should be doing that. We should be building that time in for ourselves and not just constantly running. Like, your brain needs time to shut down
Well, and
and rest.
surprisingly little, you know what I mean, as far as mindfulness would instruct, to get the benefits of mindfulness, we're really talking about 10 minutes a day of
Right.
inspection. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
To sit there and try to maintain one's awareness on the breath, or to practice a simple technique of mindfulness, about 10 minutes a day really does get us some very good benefits. Being a little bit more patient, being able to cope with our emotions, being a little bit more resilient. Only about 10 minutes a day can rid us of so many of these hurdles that we deal with as people. You know, there are plenty of people that spend hours and hours a day being mindful, meditating practitioners of the mind. But this isn't what we need to do just to get a basic practice off the ground where we're getting some benefit. All of us can go and try to train for a marathon and train 8 hours a day in cardio. But again, about 20 minutes, 4 or 5 times a week is kind of what we're being taught just to maintain basic health. And mindfulness is kind of about 10 minutes a day is about what we need in order to maintain a strong practice.
Yeah. I was funny that you say that because I was watching, I think it was an interview with Jerry Seinfeld. I could
Mm,
be wrong, but I think it was Seinfeld. And he was talking to the interviewer about meditating.
Mhm.
And you could tell that the person interviewing him wasn't, that wasn't in his wheelhouse. And so he asked Jerry, like, well, why? And
Mhm.
he's, well, you have to time, to give your mind a rest and to, recharge. And he said, well, don't you do that when you sleep? And Seinfeld says, have you ever looked at your bed when you wake up in the morning? He said, does it look like rest happened there?
Doesn't feel like it either. The older I get, it doesn't feel
Right,
like
exactly, right.
it
And
feels
I
like I'm
thought the
fighting for
same
my
thing.
life.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
no,
yeah.
I would agree. The when during sleep, our minds obviously are doing important work there,
Sure.
and there's the whole topic of dreams that we could get into. That's a whole other topic. I wouldn't even consider myself nearly expertise enough to understand what's going on with the dreams in the mind, right? But I would definitely argue that the difference is when you're trying to be mindful of any given experience, whether you're meditating or you're just trying to be mindful of any given experience that you're having, you're trying to cultivate your own attention in a certain direction. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Whereas normally we're kind of just bouncing around in our heads, right? You'll be listening to this podcast and you'll be thinking about a conversation that you were having earlier that day. Or we'll be listening to this podcast, so we'll be rehearsing a conversation we're going to have later on tonight. And this is just the normal state of our lives. And we don't realize that we're kind of always just talking to ourselves. We're kind of just
Yeah.
always, we're always at the mind's back, pushing us wherever it's going to go. And during mindfulness practice, what we're trying to do is just sit with our attention and notice every time that we've bounced off the project. And that's kind of the entire process of mindfulness, is coming back, noticing when you've lost your attention, like you were saying earlier, and coming back to your awareness. And this is just like a bicep curl for the mind, right? Every time you do this, people tend to get frustrated with this experience because they can't calm their mind, right? They can't stop their minds from thinking, and they don't realize how many reps they're missing there. Those are all important reps, because eventually you become very sensitive to when you've lost your attention. You become very sensitive to it, and that sensitivity allows you to live your life and to hone your attention in a way that you don't find yourself losing 20 minutes of your screen time. You came in to have this conversation with somebody that you cared about, and you forget that you've just watched 20 minutes of video, and now they're late for wherever they were going to go do. And this was our one opportunity to see our 14-year-old that day, right? This is what it's like to live in an untrained mind, let alone what it's like to be a responder in an untrained mind. I think a lot of the reason why so many of us are struggling with our stress, our PTSD, our coping mechanisms, because we don't know how we're responding throughout our careers until it's gotten too bad. Whereas a mindfulness practice can really give you some valuable data to know how you're thinking and feeling and experiencing your days and weeks. And when you're bouncing off this overall sense of satisfaction, noticing that something's wrong within. You know what I mean? Mindfulness can really help us throughout our careers kind of stave away some of these worst habits that we find ourselves into. The stress and the trauma that we deal with is going to happen, but we aren't training ourselves how to deal with that. You know, one of my biggest gripes. Have you ever heard the term spinning? In Arizona, we talk about being a spinner on scene. Someone that
No.
someone that gets amped up.
Oh, that's just okay. Yeah.
That term's always bothered me ever since I was a young recruit. This person's a spinner, or that person's all spun up, or because it just admits
Yep.
as a collective failure, in my opinion, as an industry to deal with and train somebody through anxiety. Here we have this otherwise healthy young civilian that wants to serve their community, and they got the right physicality. We'll train you through that. Get the right education. We'll train you through that. Get the right the physical ability to do the job. We'll train you through that. But when it comes to dealing and coping with anxiety, we ridicule a person or they figure it out. We've yet to have a tool to train somebody on how to cope through anxiety. And if we aren't training it with these young people, we fail to recognize it in ourselves. We fail to recognize ourselves getting more anxious and amplified, ourselves getting a little bit more, a little bit less patient with our communities or our families, a little bit less joyful to be around, a little bit less smiles as we go throughout our days. We tend to not notice these things about us until we just aren't the same person, you know? And I think
Right.
mindfulness practice can not only prevent all of that, but just give you a basic overall sense of enjoying your life and being present in the moment is never something that, nobody ever wants to be more distracted in life. You know,
Right.
we have all these things competing for our attention in a way that we never have as people. And we're living more and more distracted lives. But, I'm just not seeing people become more and more satisfied with their experience. Again,
Right.
the mind is going to work to just constantly keep us dissatisfied. And until we understand that satisfaction is never going to come from out there. Satisfaction really does come from within. We're just never, as human beings or as people, going to get over that hurdle because there's never enough of what we want out there, you know?
Indeed. We keep thinking that there's,
Hmm.
what's the next thing that's going to make me happy?
Hmm.
And like you said, it really does come from within.
Hmm.
And I think responders especially have a hard time with that because of all of the things that you see or hear
Hmm.
to deal with on a daily basis. And it's really hard to remember also that you're only dealing with a small percentage of the population. We
Yeah.
get into this thing where we don't want to go out. We don't want to see people because people are crazy and they're bad.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
we're not dealing with the masses. We're only dealing with,
Correct.
5%.
I don't think it's controversial to say that things have gotten a little bit more heated in society and in our culture. And as responders, we're directly dealing with some of that temperature release,
Mhm.
some of those frustrations. And it can leave us a little soured toward our communities. Here we are trying to protect and serve, and our communities don't seem to want that from us or don't seem to trust or respect us enough to let us try to do our jobs to the best that we can in any given time. But ultimately it shouldn't once again matter, like in any given experience that you are having, whether or not it is a traumatic experience, and you have to focus your attention toward the threat, right? If you are a responder and you're having a traumatic experience, there is a way within the moment to control one's response to what is going on in a way that allows you to affect more change than you otherwise would if you were caught up in your worries about what could or should happen or what did happen or shouldn't have happened. These stories and these ways that we get caught up in our mind, even during a regular scene, can limit us when we're trying to do what we're trying to affect, the change we're trying to have in the experience. But when you are a first responder, getting within the community and dealing with the traumas in that community, we tend to feel like that's all our community is after a while. We just feel like our community is nothing but these bad experiences. But despite how difficult things have come for us in society, walking on my sidewalk has been very similar over the last 30 years. You know what I mean? And walking in my community hasn't changed all that much. And I can gripe about people not holding doors open like they used to, or, all these things that come with a bad memory, right? There have always been jerks. There have always been difficult times. What we just need are stronger responders and responders that can cultivate our states of mind in a better and healthier way, because we got to serve our communities, whether or not they're the perfect ones or they're broken ones. We do have to respond and serve. And the best we can do for ourselves is to cultivate a state of mind that allows us to do that and not fight for things that should be or could be within our communities. Obviously, we want to fight for those things in the way that we can by making those changes every day. But bad days are going to happen. Bad experiences are going to happen, and you're not going to be able to live in a utopia society that's never going to have issues. And I think right now, as responders, we need to have empathy for our communities. We need to have empathy for ourselves, and we need to have empathy for society at large, because we really kind of are the frontline managers of the government. We really are kind of the ones that have to deal with a lot of the friction between the people and the government. And the best way to do that, I think, is through a little bit of compassion for ourselves as responders and our communities, even as they struggle and they fight us even. I think compassion really is the best tool that we have.
Yeah. Awesome. I love that. That is a great attitude. So what do you think, so we can wrap it up, what would you say are the top 2-3 benefits that you see from the mindfulness practice, just right off the top of your head?
Well, first, I'd argue that just having better attention. We live in a tension impoverished society. You know what I mean? People are struggling to hold their attention past a 10-second video feed, even to hold onto what they're doing. I don't know how many times I've noticed people having to go back or rehear a conversation just to get lost by the next text and do this game.
Mm-hmm.
If you're tired of living on that circuit of losing your attention just to find yourself, mindfulness really is the best way, the best tool developed to train that attention. It really is the best tool. I would also argue that mindfulness meditation gives you something to experience your trauma differently, experience your emotions differently. You're going to have emotional responses as a human being. The days of trying to pretend like we can stuff it away are rapidly coming to an end if they haven't already been put in the ground. And now we're just dealing with a bunch of broken minds and how we're going to deal with that, But mindfulness can help train your mind to be more resilient, to respond better to whether you're having a great day or a bad day. The state of your mind is going to be the state of your day. Now, nobody wants to live in a world where, if you're having a poor experience, you're just all smiles. We want to have our empathy. But we shouldn't want to hang on to our negative experiences, our negative emotions, any more than they're useful for us to hold on to them. Does that make sense? So I think mindfulness can help you relate to your emotions in a different way. And finally, I'd say the biggest thing mindfulness can do is give you a different sense of what it is to be you. Everybody reads self-help books and everybody thinks they're working on themselves all the time. But really what we're doing is we're letting our experiences continue to try to change us. Whether you're reading a book, that experience is no different than watching a moving movie or Superbad for the 100th time. You're just letting whatever experience come and change you. Whereas mindfulness meditation is a place where you can go sit for whatever given amount of time you want. And once you've cultivated your attention in a way that you can hold on to it long enough, begin to see who you are as you are experiencing your moment to moment experience. If you are a police officer or a dispatcher who's had a particularly difficult shift, having that data on yourself for what that feels like, deeply what that feels like, without the need to numb it or distract yourself with the outside world, can allow you a space to sense when that experience is coming on and let it pass in a way that you don't have to be condemned to live it out. Does this make sense? But it does take time and training. It does take a little bit of effort as somebody who's interested in training the mind, just like training the body,
Yeah. Awesome. So how can people get started?
You can get started anywhere. You can get started sitting mindfully anywhere you want at any point. There are plenty of resources online, but my platform is foundationfortified.org. You can go there and that's kind of like where we're, it's like a landing page for our Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube where you can see all of our content. And right now what I kind of have developed is what I call the recruit module. What you're going to find when you go on a YouTube page is a couple training videos, what Foundation Fortified is, plenty of mindfulness meditations that you can go and try to do them, a couple supporter ones, and some lifestyle videos where I try to blend mindfulness practice with your experience as a responder, right? But mindfulness meditation is something that I feel like we just need to start training our recruits. We need to be open to as an industry. It's going to feel a little bit different for some people at first because we're doers, right? We are doers as responders. Whereas mindfulness meditation seems as if you're doing nothing. You know what I mean?
Right.
And in a way, that is what we're trying to do, is to not do to not respond in any way, be the anti-responder to this experience and see
Right.
what that's like for just this brief moment, right? So I'm hoping that our industry is open to this. I'm hoping that I would love to be more of an advocate for this in our industry, but Foundations Fortified is where you can go and see my particular spin on mindfulness meditation. So
Cool. As one of my teachers would say, be a human being, not a human doing.
yeah. It is. I've heard similar ones. There's so many good quips, man. There's so
Yeah.
many of them out there.
Mhm.
The one I'm trying to promote right now is what I believe any given experience for someone to try to get at mindfulness would be like, is if you imagine yourself as a first responder and arriving on scene, right, to no unit without a victim and having never been dispatched, right? And so here you are on this moment, and anything that you've applied to it is just a story that you're telling yourself, right? But every given experience is just an open moment for you to be present in and to try to experience your life in a way that doesn't have to be influenced by whether or not you got your way or didn't get your way, whether or not this moment or sensation is good, bad, or otherwise, right? You can just be in a way that doesn't have to be implicated by any sorts of distraction that you find yourself bounced around throughout the day in a sense. So sorry, long-winded once again, but Foundation Fortified is where you can go to find us. So
Awesome. Well, this has been a really enlightening conversation. I love the mindfulness thing. I think we should teach it fire recruits, dispatch recruits. I think everybody should learn. And because, like you said, 10 minutes a day, it doesn't take a whole lot. And you don't have to like hum and
right,
burn your
right.
incense and,
There, there,
do all
there's
that
there's so
stuff.
many techniques, and they're all trying to get kind of at the same thing, but there is a way to do it in a very baseline way that doesn't feel like you're having to shave your head or wear robes of any sort, right? So,
Right.
if
Right.
I hope what I have to offer is valuable for people, but it is a different way of coming at training one's mind or life,
Mhm.
and that's really all it is. It's just a simple practice. It's nothing like trying to achieve nirvana or anything. I mean, you can definitely get that busy with it, but we just
Right.
want people to have a basic sense of being able to keep post-traumatic stress into turning into post-traumatic stress disorder, right?
Right.
And
Yeah.
maybe along the way, enjoy your experience a little bit more. That's really
Yes.
it really boils down to those two principles. So
And I will link all of those things in the show notes, and definitely check out your YouTube channel because I have and watched a few videos myself. So for all of you out there listening, check it out.
thank you
And
so much.
Josh, yeah,
It's
thank
been a
you
pleasure.
so much.